Have you ever wondered how theatrical distribution works for a feature film, an indie film? How downstream works after it leaves the theater? A little bit of that marketing. Today I speak with Shari, who is a partner in Sanctuary Releasing. She also has 25 plus years in theatrical distribution. So stick around this deep dive movie revolution conversation and learn everything about theatrical distribution for feature films. So, Shari, it's fantastic to have you on this. You and I we met not that long ago, but in that amount of time, it's been really nice to get to know what Josh, and Wendy are doing with Sanctuary Releasing. And so I really want to dive into this conversation to get an understanding of Sanctuary overall, but then also to kind of help educate people about distribution more. And obviously, it's really great with Sanctuary because you guys have that marketing arm. So you have this really great combination together, which is really strong. And really just hopefully give a lot of insight into how indie filmmakers can think about their films moving forward. Because one thing that I think we know a lot and we see a lot is that distribution is sort of the afterthought which it should never be. And and with marketing as well, it's sort of like let's make the whole thing and then now let's figure out how we're going to get people to see it. So thank you for being here. I'm really excited to dive into this conversation.
Thank you. It's been great knowing you, and this is exciting.
Fantastic. So I want to dive in a little bit first. The first question, kind of using it as a way to to give some background on you too, so we don't have to dive into the whole resume thing. So the first question has to do with your sort of your experience all the way to now. So you've overseen the limited releases of films like The Big Lebowski and wide releases of films like Hustlers, and even oversaw the release of Unhinged during the pandemic. So what are the kind of the factors that determine if a film has a shot theatrically today, kind of based on what you've seen in the past and what's happening now?
Well, it's not so different. There are a few qualities that help decide if a film is theatrical. I mean, it's been the same forever with the clear target audience. Does the film have a well-defined marketing hook that you can just go after those people? Is the genre or the demographic is really clear for marketing to grab their attention? And then, recognition with theatrical talent. Does it have a director or actors that are easily recognizable or a known IP? Just something that the audience goes, "Oh, yeah, I know what that is," even if it's just uh, a really quick sight on a trailer or anything that you can put in front of their eyeballs. It's do I understand who these people are and do I want to go see it? And then the other probably biggest thing to decide if it's theatrical is, would you leave the comfort of your home to go see it on a big screen? And that's probably the only thing that has really changed in the last 10 years, probably more like 5, as we all know. It got really comfortable at home. So, you really got to get something that people have an urgency to go see and get out of their house. So,
Is there
yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I was just thinking about that today too, because people have sort of made their own sort of home cinemas, right? It's like they buy their very comfy sofas and they buy, I mean, TVs, you can buy huge TVs now for a fraction of what they cost even like 5 years ago. So everyone has, so it's hard to get them away from their own home cinema. But when you're an indie filmmaker, everyone thinks like, of course of course people want to see my film in the cinema. Um, is is that something that they should be thinking about early on? Like, is this going to be a theatrical release? And if it is, how big? And how early should they think about that? Or is that something that is happening later in the conversation?
I think you should start thinking about it right away, because you're going to figure out who or what you can add to the film in order for that to happen. It could be a streaming movie ish, right? You just sort of you think, okay, this is something I wouldn't go out to see in a theater, but then you can put a couple of different ingredients into that script if you really want a theatrical run and you really want your investors to understand that you have a plan to go theatrical. then you need to add those ingredients. So I think you should start right away.
Just kind of thinking from like a producer's point of view, what if I'm thinking, okay, I want to go theatrical and that's what I want my investors to see. So what are some ingredients that I feel like, I should have in there? What are some, I guess, ingredients even that an exhibitor would want to see? Or if you were consulting with someone, you say, okay, this is what you should be having in, some elements that are really good hard hitters, that are if you could kind of list down the draws, the top two things that's like this is a film made for theatrical, or this is a thing that, could hopefully have success for theatrical.
Well, it's tough to say because there's all sorts of different genres, right? So if you have an action film, you say, okay, how many action sequences do I have? What are the beats in that script that will grab the audience? And then not just the audience, but actors, right? Talent. If you want bigger talent, you make it the beats have to be a little bit bigger, I would think, right? Like I'm not a script supervisor or anything, so I don't know. But in the distribution thought process, it's how much action do you have in it? Do you have the right actors, the right director? It really depends. I mean, you could have none of those things. Well, none of the actors and directors, right? For indie film, like there's a lot of times that nobody gets any attention from actors or directors, but if you have a great film, you will get some recognition, right? And then you will be able to do that later. The script is everything, as far as I can tell, in the indie world specifically.
I was having a conversation with someone earlier kind of about the same thing, and it's like, if you want to have something like you said, like it could be either be big set pieces or the thing that would draw in that actor, that to be like, I want to be in this movie. I can see myself in that film. They have hundreds of other offers they could be looking at and films. So what's the thing that draws that, in your script that says this is why an actor should be in here? Because chances are that's the same reason why someone's like, that's why I want to see the movie, and especially see it in a cinema. So knowing kind of what that is early on, and I like the idea. I never thought about it, but I like the idea that a distributor, someone could come in early on and help look at that and say, yeah, these are the things that an audience would be really interested in seeing from the beginning, early on inside the script, or even even before you have an actor. So, so in that kind of regard, when do you say that you should bring on someone, bring on the distribution side, bring on the marketing side, even if it's just a conversation? I mean, how early? Because I'll frame it even better too. Because a lot of times independent filmmakers don't have a lot of money to work with, right? And then they're trying to get that money. So in their minds, it's like, well, I can't really pay a distributor to work with a distributor now. I can't really pay a marketer now. So I think that's also why they look at it so later on, because like I got to make them, like their first thought is I just got to find the money just to make the movie, So what do you say to kind of like what's the a route for someone to kind of talk to a distributor early on and market early on, knowing that they don't really have a lot of money to work with just yet?
I would suggest reaching out right away, like right when you uh, start talking to investors, actually, because you're going to want to plan for that extra. Like, you can't just make a film and hope that you can monetize it, right? There's a lot of money, time, effort, exhaustion from everybody involved not to be able to monetize it, not have a plan, right? And your plan could change here and there, but your overall plan should include distribution. And once you start those conversations early on, you'll be able to have a relationship with this person. And, look, for Sanctuary specifically, we would come on during filming, um, ideally, right? We can come on anytime, but ideally we would come on during filming and start the marketing process during that time. And then once you start the relationship earlier, you already know you have a clear path to distribution and marketing and distribution, theatrical, downstream, non-theatrical, the whole life, right? And this thing could last, the monetizing of it can last years. So you really need to get in A, with somebody you can work with easily, and B, um, it is it's imperative that you when you go to investors, they want to see that you have a plan to monetize. They don't want to say, oh, okay, well, you're just going to make a film. That's great. You need to find a way to profit. And if you go to the investors with that plan, they are more likely to help fund your project.
So with that, because you were talking about kind of that whole pipeline from theatrical to downstream and non-theatrical, et cetera, do you do you suggest that every film, I mean, if it can do some kind of theatrical run, because I think also too for, I mean, obviously the dream for every filmmaker is like, ah, I want my movie in the cinemas. And sometimes they're like, well, I don't know how I can do that. So I'm just going to try to, self-release it or get it to take it through an aggregator or someone to do it downstream for me. But theatrical has a lot of value. And can you kind of like touch on, I guess, even small theatrical, like 100 screens or 200 screens, and kind of what that means and how that could even, and how that's even sort of possible for sort of let's say we're talking about like a $2-3 million film, a small indie film, and and that marketing budget is probably not that high, how they can kind of get the most out of using theatrical, and if that's a route they should take, or if you should say, hey, focus more on the downstream. Where do you see, what do you see in that kind of?
That's a lot of questions in one. So
That was a lot of questions. Sorry about that.
um, so I'm going to go with my gut here and
Okay.
say say that any budget film can make it or not, right? It really depends on the feel of the movie, on the hooks of the movie, on all of the ingredients, right? So you've got, and a good example of that is Good Dog in the last 2 weeks, right? So lower budget, no stars except the dog, of course, but and they came out on a weekend with Taylor Swift of all people. I mean, it was a big weekend, and they made $2.5 million. And all in so far, they're gonna hit over five by the end of the weekend, and like that's a great success. But then you take something that Sony's produced, and it doesn't make enough money, right? There's so many different ways of doing this, of being able to monetize or not. And Good Dog could have been something that they said, we have to go straight to streaming, right? But somebody took a chance and it worked. And so it really just depends on the project. I mean, you have to know the script and decide at that point. And then maybe it changes. You can always change your decisions, right? You can always go, okay, you know what, we're going to market it over here. And we only have this much budget for marketing. And by the way, Good Dog did not have a tremendous budget for marketing. So um, if you have a smaller budget, and you think, okay, this could really go just streaming, then you pile all of that money into the streaming. But it's really a decision, game time decision, right? It's not one of those things where you can just call it from the get-go. Sometimes you have magic involved, in films, and it just works. So yes, in those kind of situations, absolutely go theatrical. If it doesn't have the magic, still worthy, it's still something that should be seen. Okay, then you throw all your marketing money into, you just make good decisions, right? I don't find that people understand the distribution pipeline as much as they should if they want to self-release. Self-releasing is a big deal. It is a lot of decisions. And so it is not something that you should take on lightly. You should definitely hire professionals. And I understand it's a cost, right? There's a cost involved, and there's not a lot of money to spread around. But even if you hire one person that knows the terrain, that can walk you through it, it's worth it. because there are so many little tiny decisions that you just don't know you're getting involved in, and it's minutia to the point of you just going, forget it, we're just going to shelve this thing. It's a lot. And so I would definitely steer away from self-distributing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, 100. I think I would 100%. I mean, I know that people are, I think because I don't, my guess is that is the lack of knowledge. Like, I don't know I see it floating around, but it's like you don't even know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people think it's like, well, it's just getting it into a cinema, or I just put it on Amazon or whatever, and and people will see it. And obviously, it's so much more than that. And back to, Good Dog, which was such a great example, and talking about theatrical, and I think this, I don't know if this is an excuse that filmmakers use, or if they to avoid theatrical, or if they truly believe it, but this idea that, theatrical is dead, movies aren't surviving. A lot of news is that you'll see films that are bombing at the box office, so theatrical is dying. But I mean, but like your example there, I mean, it shows that people will still go see a good film, especially if it's got that hook like you were talking about. Like, how are you bringing people in? And what is that thing that you're saying that, that brings them in?
What brings them in? It is it well, with Good Dog, it was, you touched everybody's heart.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like the kid in Poltergeist. You're like, no,
Yeah.
you're not going to mess with a
Yeah, yeah,
kid.
yeah, yeah. I love that. Yeah,
you know, now it's a
exactly.
dog. You're like,
Yeah,
no.
exactly.
Um,
That's a great analogy right there.
right? It's just
Yeah,
it's touching the heart,
yeah.
right? And
That's
touching the deep recesses of protector mode, and all of that.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that.
yeah.
And you don't know what's gonna work either. I mean, obviously you can try the best you can. And I think that's a good, that's the thing. It's like, you don't know if the film will succeed. You can do the best you can to, you know, tap into the zeitgeist or tap into emotions or whatnot, but some things may just not connect, and you do the best. And I think that probably even goes a bit to making sure that your marketing is very on point. Because if you're going to spend that money, right, you got to make sure it's hitting the right people and has the best chance.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that would be the for that movie, digital really worked because it was really about the fans just exacerbating the momentum. They were all over the place online saying, "Oh my God, this is crazy! Did you see this?" That's the kind of marketing you need to get people's attention. And if you have that hook, that marketing can go, "Oh, this is beautiful," and then they usher it into the right place, then you're golden. It's when there's not a hook and it's a small film, no stars, no hook. It's harder. It's harder for the whole machine to really work.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's so important because everyone believes, obviously, that their film is great and it's gonna be a great film, and like, why wouldn't people love it? But I think it's no different than if you're gonna go on the app store on your phone and you're gonna download a new calendar app and there's 1,000 calendar app. Like, what's the thing that's standing out? It's like, that's why I want that. This is no different than I mean, there's hundreds of
Yeah.
movies, you know, 20 movies.
Yeah. What brings your eyes to that
Yeah,
one?
to that one,
Right.
exactly. And so with that, still kind of staying on that theatrical there and kind of moving to a little bit to the downstream of that area. Um, I know we've talked about this before, and when we had just our own conversations, but like how important theatrical, even small, can be for downstream. That it will help increase if you just skip completely theatrical and just do downstream. A film, of course, can do well, but theatrical can help even just a little bit, help really boost that.
Yeah, it can. Definitely. You wouldn't, it just depends on the film. You could go 2 runs, you could
Yeah,
go 1,000 runs, but whatever that is, you bang out the marketing. And sometimes at the same time that you're marketing for the downstream, so that you really get some heat on the downstream instead of um, just concentrating on the theatrical. because you may not think it's as theatrical. So you're sort of hedging your bets and getting some marketing heat in the theatrical space to ramp up the downstream. And that does definitely works. It's not theaters don't love it as much.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's just
Yeah,
but they if you work with them, they allow it in some fashion. And if you really pump up the marketing for
yeah,
those runs. So
yeah. Yeah,
you can get away with it.
I feel like too that theatrical, even if people aren't, seeing it, at least it kind of builds this awareness. So maybe it's like you see a poster or you see something, like it's like I'm not going to see that movie, but when it comes out to streaming, I'll probably watch it. And
Mhm.
in a way, I mean, obviously you want people to come to the cinemas, but if they don't, at least there's a sort of an awareness of it, which can
Yes.
help when they are scrolling, when they're sort of doom scrolling on Netflix, and by chance that sort of name or poster or whatever comes along, like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember seeing that,
Yeah.
6, 8 months ago, and I was like, I wanted to watch that movie, and then now I'm going to check it out. So I think that, I mean, that it builds some kind of awareness anyway, even if people aren't seeing it. At least it kind of creates this, you know, yeah, awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always good. Awareness is great in any fashion. Just make sure you're out there and getting some heat on anything you're doing.
Yeah. Fantastic. I want to move on a little bit to some things that you guys doing with Sanctuary, and some of the. I know you're looking at the goal is to really help indie filmmakers, and I know I talk a lot about indie filmmakers because that's sort of who the audience is, but I know that Sanctuary, you guys can work with all kinds of projects because
Sure.
you have a huge experience and resumes combined. But just for this sake, and what are kind of some of the technologies and tools and things you're seeing that helps kind of indie filmmakers distribute their films in a way that that can help sort of level the playing field with studios. Obviously, studios have these big machines and money behind them, but now there's things that are coming out and taking place that kind of help with indie filmmakers and distribution. What are some of those things? I mean, you can talk about Sanctuary itself doing, or just in general that you see that's kind of helping, get those films through distribution or seen, or or just or building even tighter systems. You can take it kind of any direction you want. I'm just thinking overall, about all the different tools and from AI tools looking at pre-sales and things like that. So
For Sanctuary, we have different tools at the ready to make sure that we distribute the cheapest way possible, doing it right, right? Like we all have very high standards, but we're going to like I have created with my engineers a new distribution software, so I will uh, not charge as much as they would for a regular software, right? To distribute film into the theaters directly to deluxe to the theater. So it's one of those things where we are trying to find all of the ways in distribution to cut the price so you can throw it into media, because that is the highest price arena, right? And it is the most important arena. So you really need to like just trim everything else, make it just rock bottom prices, throw it all into media and get you the word out, right? Because if nobody knows about the film, your business is not going to last anyway. So you might as well take that money, throw it over there, and start marketing.
I don't even think so many people are aware of how much money and what goes into distribution. Like just that right there, just that tiny little piece you talked about, and what's involved with getting the film in essence to exhibitors, and then how just cutting that down a little bit can save a little bit of money. And I think that's so important for people to understand the actual costs of distribution. Like we know it's producers and it's like they know what it costs to make the film because that's what they're doing. They're breaking those costs down. A line item budget, it's very detailed, every single cost. but I don't think they understand the cost of distribution. And knowing that too can help them decide where to go. Like I don't like I think I'm sort of these are things that are kind of just come to my head now. If you're sort of even picking out a distributor to be like, okay, what is this one charging me and why? Where's that money going? How do they use the money? Can I save a little bit of that going here? Because a lot of times it's just, well, will they get my film out there and get it seen? But there's more than that. And I think there's many more things to take into consideration.
There's so much more.
So I,
There's so much more. There's such a big budget on distribution and marketing. Not to scare anybody, but they're real costs. It's not like we're just sort of saying, well, it's just going to cost, $100,000 for this. And
yeah,
then it really costs 40. That's where a lot of companies in the olden days have gotten in trouble, where they just charge for every little thing. And if you're getting picked up by a studio, they're charging you for paper clips and this and that. And, it, it, and maybe they don't now. I'm not going to throw anybody into the bus, but there is a history of finding things to charge for, right? Because it's not their money. Maybe this is a
yeah,
little bit too much inside baseball, but there's a reason why you don't see a huge profit when it comes to studio financing or studio accounting.
yeah,
And to have it be way more transparent and upfront, I think that makes them feel better, because there are big costs to distribution. But if you're feeling like there's somebody trying to nickel and dime you or whatever, they don't have control over it, then they're going to feel like it's not being done correctly. And that's what we want to avoid at Sanctuary. We want it to be transparent. We want you to understand what all the costs mean. And we're not going to overcharge you for media when there's enough cost involved in the first place.
yeah. And I love that. And I think, and then that just kind of loops back around what we talked about at the beginning, which is, why it's so important to bring, distribution conversations in early. So you really know what those costs are going to be when you get to that point. And if you need to raise extra financing with an investor, or you need to add extra money in that budget, but in knowing exactly why it's going to be there, and to say like, this is like, we need to have an extra 350,000 or 400, whatever it is, based on the budget of your film, and to say like, we need this extra money for this specific reason, and here's why, and this is what that this distributor is going to do for us, and help us with, and exactly why that's happening. Because the hardest thing is, you've spent all the money, you've already asked the investors all the money, and then you get to the end and you're trying to figure out distribution and you don't really have money left, and it's hard to ask for a bunch of money at the end and figure
Yeah,
out
and based on your product, right? They need to know they
exactly.
need to know what the product looks like before they fund it at that point. But if you already have it, you understand that there's a path. You
Yeah,
have the path set out.
exactly. And then with that, on that sort of talking about the money side, I mean, um, can we dive a bit into sort of revenue on different, I guess, obviously the number one thing that, well, an investor wants to see is revenue, obviously. If, and where is there an area in distribution that you can see the most revenue, and sort of avoiding like those outliers of, films that go off and do, if we're just talking about very general across the board average, you know, is it in theatrical? Is it in that first run? What part of downstream? I mean, so is there an area you can say like, this is where you're most likely to see the highest level of revenue, and after that it'll kind of, you know, go down in different places?
Well, it depends on, if you make enough in theatrical, you will see revenue. Well, you'll see any revenue from
Yeah,
theatrical, right? You'll get a percentage of whatever the box office is. Is that going to cover your costs? That's up to the success or non-success, hate to
yeah,
say failure, of a film, right? But where you're going to see in the downstream, where you're going to see the most revenue is in the beginning, in the transactional. In the first few windows are the most profitable. And that's where you're really going to see what this film is going to do on the downstream. This could last, you can have revenue for 10 years on a film for between downstream and non-theatrical. But it's how long is your first few windows, how long are your first few windows going to bring in that money? That's up to the marketing gods, I guess. you know?
So I mean, yeah. So we're back to. I mean, that's the important thing. I mean, we're back to that again, which is the thing. I mean, they're so intertwined and so tied together, the distribution and marketing, and I think that's so important because I think that again, I think too many films see that if I just get it out there, people will see it and people will like it. But the only way these things really are successful is, I mean, it's like you got to have that first marketing push. And of course, then you have word of mouth can come in later and all these things can happen, but none of that can happen if people aren't even sort of aware that this film even exists to begin with. And that's where marketing comes into play.
Right, right.
And so talking about, and so now actually I want to kind of move the marketing to a little bit to long tail because we're talking about downstream. You talked about how a film could have, 10 years of seeing revenue. I mean, obviously it'll go up and down and can get very, very little on the long tail. But is there anything that you see happening or that, you suggest to filmmakers in that long tail that they can do to kind of help boost any revenue along that? If let's say 2 years later, is there 3 years later after they've done that theatrical run in that long tail where you can see any, you can push to get a spike for some reason?
You know, that might be a little bit more detail with our downstream person, but I will say in what came to my mind right away was that there's not a lot you can do 2 years later because your audience either knows it's there or doesn't. But sometimes there's somebody in the film became a big star and that'll spike it. Something happened in the culture that you know it correlated with your film and all of a sudden there's a spike there. That's kind of more of what you're looking for. And then you can start either tweeting about it or something. Hey, go look at my film or whatever. But I kind of feel like after 2 years, your audience knows it's there or doesn't, you know?
So one of the things I feel like I see quite a bit, and even on LinkedIn and other and producers talking, and even just hearing conversations, is that that they want to kind of oversee the distribution themselves, and especially because, as you kind of talked about, things have become simplified, simplified, so they can be like, well, I can just do this. This can't be as hard as it used to be. I'm not printing, there's no prints and this and that, and I'm just sending a file and I can oversee it, and so. Uh, is that a route that you suggest taking? Like a producer is gonna maybe they'll hire someone with marketing, and then maybe they'll hire someone else with some downstream, and then maybe hire someone with theatrical, or is it? I mean, does that kind of create any chaos? Is that a good system for them to take?
Well, I can understand why they would want to get involved. I mean, everybody's talking since whatever, 2019 or something about, self-distributing. And it gets exciting, right? You have full control. This is great. Well, I've seen producers just about melt down with the amount of detail that we have to deal with. There is a ton deadlines, details on posters, details on trailers, the NPA rating stat. Like, there's just so many things that you have to make decisions about that you really don't need to. And what I find is that when they decide, okay, I got to hire a marketing person and a distribution person and a downstream person, they hire all of these people, but they don't connect the dots. They don't have, these people have never worked together before. And some of them are competitive, some of them aren't. So they don't really want to give you all the information, but sometimes they do. It's a very disjointed system when you hire people that haven't worked together and aren't a team and don't have a common goal.
I love that. You know what just hit me instantly was thinking like you would never, you would never hire because I was on the production manager side of things. You would never just like you'd never go to the director and be like, I'm gonna hire your cinematographer for you, and I'm gonna hire your art director for you, and I'm gonna hire and then hire all these people, and they're like, I don't even know these people, and now they're gonna try to figure out how to work together and this and that. And I think it's kind of the same thing that yeah, there's so many people that are involved in that distribution and marketing, and you want that to be as fluid as possible, and you want these people to work together. I mean, I think that I guess it makes. I mean, obviously, I fully understand, why sanctuary releasing is designed the way it is, because it's like, you're coming together with theatrical, with downstream, with marketing. It's all together. You all work together, and and producers don't have to kind of piecemeal this together.
I understand why people want to do it. I also, you don't feel like you have big enough movie for a studio. Well, just kind of take the studio model for a minute. They have hundreds of people in distribution and marketing. Hundreds. This is not this is not a small machine, right? And you boil it down to a smaller film, well, you still need people, right? You can't do it on your own, and you can't have it be too small, and you can't have it disjointed. So you need your film, your project deserves professionals. That's what I find to be a little alarming to me is that they have this baby and they throw it feels like they throw it to the wind if they're doing it themselves because they've never done it before. They don't know the terrain, they don't know the pitfalls, they don't know what you can come across in a theater, they don't know what you can come across downstream. And that's where I feel like you need to take care of this baby and hire people that have done it before.
I wonder if it's this like false, I don't know how to phrase this, but maybe this false sense of like a badge of honor because like you talked about this word and this idea of like self-distribution has been popping around for the last 3, 4 years, especially after COVID. And I think getting back into people like, I'm just going to make my movie myself and I'm also going to self-distribute it. And I think maybe there's producers who are just diving into it and as a sense of like, well, I'm a producer, I can produce a movie. It's like, well, I can obviously self-distribute a movie too and this idea of just of doing it. And like you said, but I mean, why take that risk? I mean, obviously focus on, and like, there's nothing wrong with learning it, right? To be like, I want to work with sanctuary releasing because I want to learn how this process works. But yeah, why take something that you put so much effort, money, and time, and other people's money, of course, into making, and then be like, now let me just try to figure it out and how to get it out to the world. And I think
Right.
there's this misconception of, and I was probably one of those people as well, that it's just like, you just self-distribute. Like, it's not that hard. You just get out there. It took having a lot of these kind of conversations to realize, oh shit, there's a lot involved. Like, I remember the first time I met you all and we were talking about a film and of course we can't say any films by name or anything like that, but and then just listening to you all discuss the film, even between like I was even between each other, like, oh, you were asking each other's questions and I'm just listening. It was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is just the first conversation and my head is already, you know. And so yeah, I think it's so important to yeah, to hand it off to people who know what they're doing and not take that chance. What okay, if you find so let's okay, here's a if you what I mean, what do you say to a hard-headed producer that's like I want to self-distribute? Because let's put it from my perspective. Like this would be a sort of advice you give me, and I would because I talk to a lot of producers and things, and sometimes like, oh, we're just gonna self-distribute, we're gonna do things ourselves, and like, what that one thing that I should say to them that says, okay, this is why you should not do it, and you definitely need to go, the route through professionals.
Well, I think that I guess it just depends on what the reason why they would want to do it, right? Is the reason that you think your film's too small? Do you think that it's going to make a ton of money and you want that back? Or do you want there's all sorts of reasons. So if it's too small, then hire one person that can consult with you throughout the process. If you think I want all the money back, but you think that it's going to make a ton of money, then hire something like a sanctuary where we only hire people. So there's three of us. We only hire people that we need, right? We're going to hire consultants that we know, that we trust, that are specifically picked for your film, right? If I've got somebody who is perfect for zombie movies, I'm going to hire that person. If I've got somebody perfect for an art film, I'm going to hire that person. So then that's all under us. So we manage all of them, but we are not going to overhire, right? So we're going to keep the costs down by hiring exactly who you need, not a bunch of extra people that are getting paid for no reason, right? So, and then if you bring in our case, you would bring the P&A to us, we would manage that, and full transparency, and then all of the return is yours. There's no keeping part of the profits. There's no funky accounting. There's nothing behind it. It's just, here's the cost to do it, here's the return, and that's yours. And so if you want transparency and that kind of thing, if you think you're going to make a ton of money on this film, then why wouldn't you do it like this?
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I think that's also what I like too, is you're kind of touching on something that people, I think where the sort of the self-distribution thing comes from too, is that it's like I want to make the money. If I do it myself, I have a chance of making the most money. I'm not going to go to a distributor who's then, like you said, like nickel and dime me and and things like that. People, it's already hard for movies to make money. And then, I think probably producers or where, once they hand it off and they're sort of out of the picture in essence, they're afraid and they're just, they're going to make even less money because they have now
Right.
had to just kind of get rid of it. And let's hope these people do do something good by me.
That's hard. I can't imagine, right? You put everything you have into this thing and then you have no control. I get that. That is, I would think, the scariest thing about the process. But when you hire somebody like us, and I'm sure there's others, I'm not trying, hey, you need to hire a sanctuary. But when you hire people like us, it is so transparent that you don't feel like you're just handing it over and then you don't get the money back. And I'm sure that has happened many times, and there's many horror stories in the producing world. But it's a different day. It is definitely a different day, and it is a day that you don't need to be bogged down with distributing. It is. It is. I could never produce a movie because I don't know what I don't know, and
Yeah.
that's where it gets ugly. Because
Yeah.
then you trip over things, and you're like, "Oh my god, what do I do with that?" You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And that's the hard thing is, especially during distribution and even during producing movie, like, like when you trip over things, it can cause so many problems and delays and essence. But the same thing in distribution, you trip over things, and that could have been that moment that, made you some more money or got more awareness or whatever it is. You tripped over a little bit of marketing, but now you spent that money and it didn't do what you had hoped it would do, or you tripped over a little bit of theatrical. And now it's not doing the run you had hoped. And so, you don't want to, yeah, you don't want to be kind of learning as you go while doing it. I mean, I think, yeah, and that and I like what you said, and like, and like you're fully transparent. So I mean, if the producers want to see how it's working, you're there doing it. And also, what I love that you said about Sanctuary, which makes so much sense too, which is so great for indie filmmakers and indie films and producers, is that you don't have a lot of overhead. You don't have this staff of 100 people or 30 people or
Right.
whatever. It's like people are chosen for your project or for what is needed. If like you said, oh, they made this a specific kind of zombie film, so we're going to bring in someone who may come in for a little bit or whatever, but it's like who really knows that arena and that area to ensure you have the best chance of your film. And that's really interesting, as opposed to a company that has hired its staff and that's the staff, and also too, then there's that overhead. So that's also where some of that money is going. They've got to take a bigger piece because they've got to feed that overhead as well.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, in essence, it's kind of, yeah, it's Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, really is like it's like an indie style film for indie style distribution marketing for indie filmmakers. Because if you think of it that way, it's just like you bring in what you need to make it successful and try not to waste any money along the way, so you can make
Right.
the most money. If
That's the
you
goal.
if if you could sort of drop out one piece of advice, it's like if you're thinking about distribution and where to and who to work with, because that's what we're trying to really say now is like make sure you work with the right people. What's something that they should look out for? That, it could either be here's a red flag and maybe be wary here, or it's like here are the green lights. These are the kinds of people. Like this is what if you had a film and you had to go to if you had to go through a company, what would you be looking for? Let's put it that way.
I would be looking for transparency and honesty. And if you can look them in the eye and really know that they are for your film, that is probably one of the most important things to me is, you know, this is their baby and you have to treat it like their baby. And it can't be half-hearted, right? This person has to be for you and your representative. And I think the most important thing is, to me, the most important thing is, well, I can do it all on my own, right? If there's the one person can do it all on their own, and you have more than, I don't even know, you know what? It doesn't even matter. If you cannot use somebody that is just singular company, a single person can't do it all. It's just, I mean, it's not just like having your own self distribution, but it's somewhat like that because there's not really many people that can do distribution and marketing correctly on their own, and distribution downstream as well, theatrical and downstream. I'm sort of going in different directions, which is probably not great for a wrap up.
No, it's okay. No, it's good. I mean, that's what I like when it goes in different directions. I'm sure people listening and watching like it too, because it helps them think about, though it helps them think about and be aware of those different directions as well. So one of the things I have seen this happen a lot and in conversations too, is that producers, a lot of budgets I see will be budget for the film of making the film, from everything from pre-production, production, and post-production. And they may have like pieces of distribution or something in there. It's like this little thing. It's like they need to have a little bit of like 1% of something for whatever reason. But they're not actually budgeting the distribution, not actually budgeting the marketing in that whole budget to raise from investors. I think they want to just go to distributor will distribute it, and then they will get a piece of that revenue. But that's probably so based on this whole conversation we've been having, that's probably not the best way. I mean, really, they should be talking to people like you or anybody else early, right? To budget and then so they can put that into their financing package and raise that money. I mean, so right, is that the route you think they should be taking?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. If whether you go theatrical or downstream or both, just make sure you connect with somebody prior to filming about budgets for it all. Distribution, marketing, downstream marketing, and delivery. Right, all of these things count. Right, the downstream. I think people forget that there's another charge for marketing and delivery for downstream. There are costs to everything, and if you want to see a return, then if it's you've got to do it on your own. If other companies are funding your P&A, they will see the profit first. And the more you know, the better position you are to protect your film. This is your project, and your investors be sure that you get back what that project deserves.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and I can see how it's. I mean, I imagine from like maybe from a producer point of view, it's like, well, now I'm asking my investor to invest more, but I mean, if you think about it on the flip side of that, you're asking them to invest more to make more. In essence, like,
Yeah,
look, it's going to cost 5 million to make this film, but we actually need 8 million because we want to do three to cover all of distribution and all of marketing and distribution, distribution downstream and marketing downstream or whatever, whatever the number is. I'm just saying a number, but I think it's because that three then can help hopefully allow us to see that revenue we were talking about, that return on investment. I think it's much easier to convince an investor to invest, knowing that you also have money specifically for this, specifically for how the movie is going to make money.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the investors actually take you much more seriously if you have a way to profit.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I think this has been great. And one, it's always great chatting with you because I learned so much. And also, I think it's so important to maybe leave distribution for the distributors and not so much self-distribution. I can get it if you've got your own little, 30,000 or 50,000 micro budget film or something, and you're like trying to figure it out.
Right.
But once you kind of get into bigger numbers, and I always say, like, the moment you have an investor involved, like you now have somebody else's money that you should, you're responsible of, in essence. And you've got to treat with the
Yeah.
greatest respect, especially if you want that person to come back. So
Right.
yeah, so it's great to dive into and understand the cost behind distribution and why producers and indie filmmakers should be uh, going through an actual distribution company and a marketing company, and looking at all those things and not just doing it themselves. Well, thank you so much. It was fantastic chatting with you, and I'm really
Thank
excited
you.
what Sanctuary has going next.